out early, or have somebody else at your organization that you'd want to watch this, they should be able to do that. So can you see my screen okay?
Well, Scott, right now we're just seeing your desktop, and it looks like we have the Saleslogix Form Designer popping up right now.
Okay, I'm going to back out of that
slow
because I want to kind of explain how we got here.
Okay.
So this is actually a functionality that was introduced with version 8, but they're continuing to improve on it with 8.2. So I'm showing it to you in 8.2 today. So bear with me if I'm having a few glitches. I just got my 8.2 demo system up and running. It seems to be fine. So if I do have a little snag here and there, I apologize. But the the concept of the live editing, like I said, came out in 8.0. It was improved in 8.1 slightly, and it's improved even further in 8.2. And so traditionally in Saleslogix, now Infor CRM, the one and only way you could make any changes to the screens themselves is by opening the application architect and going and finding in there, which is not terribly intuitive. You would have to go find the form that you wanted to edit. You'd have to open that form, make your changes in the application architect, save the changes, do a rebuild, and a redeploy, which kicks everybody out of the system when you do that. So it was simple changes were not simple. I mean, it was a lot of steps and a lot of work to get there. And so what they've done is they've made the ability now for the administrator user. So I've logged into the web client here. This is 8.2 again, as the administrator user. And because I did that, I'll go to the account detail view now. I'll just click on Abbott Limited here. And you'll notice in the upper right a little piece of paper with a pencil, and it pops up and says Edit Form. So every screen that's eligible to be edited in this mode, and not all of them are. Most of the screens are, most of the tabs and most of the pop-up views and whatnot are editable through this Inline Editor or Live Editor function. And so because I'm the administrator, there's the button, and you'll see that, like I said, on other forms and views, including your tabs, you'll see that little editor button here, and so we can edit that screen. You can even edit one-to-many tabs, but or some of them, not all of them. If you don't see that little pencil icon, it means that one's not editable, but there's a few of them that are. So as long as you have that, you can shift it into that edit mode. So I'll go ahead and click on that Edit Form button, and the screen does a little refresh dance here. And now you should see the Form Designer pop up for the screen we were on, which is the account detail view. So you can do the same thing with all the main entities, contacts, leads, opportunities, tickets. And you'll notice that it is kind of a WYSIWYG editor. So the way the columns and rows of fields, how they appear on the actual web interface, are being presented here, but now we're in this edit mode. Something else I'll mention here is those of you that do develop in the application architect, you know that it stores your changes in the virtual file system. So it kind of remembers and stores your changes, and then you, like I said, build and deploy, and it pushes them out to the website. We're actually building changes in reverse of that. And so we can make changes here in the Form Designer, and it is, in fact, going to update the virtual file system. So it is going backwards through that process. And again, these are live changes, though. So there's a little bit of danger to consider here, and that danger is that if I make a change to my production system right now, and once I save those changes, the next time any of my users refresh that screen I made changes to, they're going to see that change. So these changes are happening live with the system running. It's not going to kick people out of your system, but it is going to make the update live. And so just be cautious that that's what's happening. It's a live update to the production system. It's global. Everybody's going to see the change you make, and it's going to save the change you make back into the virtual file system. So it does become part of the project manifest, and it's just pushing those changes behind the hood after we make the change. Okay, so for example, let's click on a field that's already on the existing screen called Description of Business. I'll move this up a little bit here. That's an out-of-the-box field. That's on the screen. This is an unmodified system. And you'll notice that down at the bottom now, because the Description of Business is the field that I have highlighted, you'll also notice that it shows you in the database which field that particular field is bound to in the database. So the name of the field itself, even though the label is DESE period of business, the actual field in the database is called business description, and here it is right here. So on the right-hand side of the screen, depending on what the entity is that you open, we'll do another one here before we leave, but because I started at the account detail view, to add a field, which is basically all your available fields in that entity, are shown to me over on the right-hand side. So this is every field in the database that is part of the account entity table structure, and whether or not the field shows up on any screen anywhere, it doesn't matter. It shows me all of them because they're all available to me to add to the screen if I want to. And we'll do that in a second. So description of business, you can see that the caption is on the left, or the label. You can move it to the center or to the right. You can change it to, something other than description of business. So you can say, what do they do? Maybe this just makes more sense to your users. It's still the business description field, but I've used the word what do they do because that's more logical to my users. You'll also see a tooltip over here. And a tooltip is what they get when they hover their mouse over the screen. So you can say, describe what business they are in. And so this gives them your users more information about what they should be putting in that field, and that's using that tooltip capability. You can also make the field read-only from here. And if we go to the Advanced tab, you can also make it visible or not visible. So this is a way to turn a field off that you don't want anymore. So maybe there's a field on one of these screens, you just don't use it. It's there, but it doesn't make any sense for you. So you can make it invisible, and it then doesn't show up on the web client interface. So that's a way you can we're talking about adding fields, we're talking about modifying fields, but we can hide it altogether if you just simply don't want to see it. You can turn visibility off and the field will vanish. So just for fun, let's turn off industry. We'll make it not visible. And we've already made our little change here to business description. What do they do? And we added a tooltip. So we'll save it. And you'll see it saving it here. Takes just a second, because it is doing a whole bunch of script writing behind the scenes here. Okay, so it looks like it's done. And now if we go back to accounts, we should see our simple changes we made here. And there we go. So we'll open up that detail view for Abbott Limited, which should do a refresh. You do a refresh here. Come on. Need some Jeopardy music. Okay, so now you can see after I refresh the screen, those changes I made, the industry field, gone. Business description is now, what do they do? That's the label. And if I hover my mouse over the box, you'll see that little tooltip we added, which helps your users understand, well, what am I supposed to put in this box? And it's describe what business they are in, and so that's how you made the change. And again, this is a change that's going to be for all the users. It's going to happen live and in real time, and it did write this change back into the project manifest as we talked about. Okay, so let's take a look at another one here. Let's go to, for example, opportunities, and we'll add a field there. I told you we're going to have a problem because my screen looked all messed up to me, but let me refresh it here. Waiting. Here we go. All opportunities, and let's just go into one of these opportunity records. There we go. Finally got there. Okay, so let's take a look at this screen now. So we'll shift into the designer mode. Click on the little pencil and paper icon here. And there's our designer mode for the opportunity screen. And now if we want to add a field, again, you're presented with all the fields that are available to you over on the right. And what you can do is, if we scroll down to the bottom and we right-click, because this is a two-column screen rather than a three-column screen, so we can tell it that we want to insert another column and make it a three-column screen, or we can tell it we want to insert a row either above or below the line that I was on when I started. So I started on this bottom row, which has comments on it. That's all it has on it. So if I right-click and say insert a row below it, and then I scroll down, you can see I have two brand new boxes that I could put something in there if I wanted to from the table. So these are placeholders on the screen. And so what we can do is find a field that we want to add to that view, and I'll just pick for fun exchange rate. I'm dragging it over from the right, and I want to add the, let's pick something a little weird, and we'll say reason and drag that over. And so now I have two fields that were in the database, and I'll mention here too that you can add as many fields to Saleslogix Infor CRM that you want to. These are just the ones that are already created in the database. So if you were to add new fields and make them available to the web client, they're going to show up in this database schema, just like all these other out-of-the-box fields do. Okay, so we've added a row at the bottom. We've added two fields, and we're just going to add a tooltip. Say what's the currency they use, and I'm okay with everything else that's on there. So we'll just save it and go back to the opportunity screen. And fingers crossed, everything will have worked as advertised. We should have a couple new fields. So let's go back into Abbott Limited Phase 1. Oops, I didn't click on it. There we go. I'm going to refresh my screen so I get that new view. There we go. Sorry, there's a lot of waiting for things to happen here because we're doing a lot of heavy lifting behind the scenes. So thank you for bearing with me as my screens are gyrating and refreshing. But anyway, here you go. So on our opportunity detail view, we have now the exchange rate field, and we have the reason that I won or lost, which this is already a won opportunity, and the reason I told the system when I won it is because we had a better price. So you can see that it automatically put in price as the reason we won this because I already filled out that form when we closed out this opportunity and won it. There is no exchange rate in this case, but if there was, you would see what the exchange rate is if this was a foreign currency. So now if you want to change it again, of course, you can go back in and hide these fields, and they would be a blank spot on the screen, and you could put a different field in there if you wanted to. But with that, Bree, that's what I wanted to show today, is just how easy it could be to make changes to these screens, hide fields, edit labels, add tooltips, add new fields to screens. So it's pretty slick the way that works. So do we have any questions about this so far?
Thanks, Scott. We do have a question that came in, and it's regarding the tooltip text and wondering if there's a max length for that text.
That's a good question. I believe there probably is. I don't know what it is. So let's just go back in there for fun and click on one of those fields. I don't know the answer for sure, but let me just type a bunch of gobbledygook and see if it ever makes me stop. Now it's going on and on and on and on and on. Pretty helpful stuff. I can see that now. So we'll have to get that answer to you offline because I don't know if there is. There probably is, but it's because it's SQL. It could be in the thousands of characters. But we'll post an answer to that question for you. I just don't know today. All right. Any other questions?
Yeah, we did have a few more come in.
Sure.
Are the changes saved when you upgrade?
Well, remember, it does backfill the project manifest with these changes you make, so they do become part of your virtual file system. And when you upgrade, you'll always want to save your changes as a bundle. And so when you do an upgrade, you run a comparison, you create a master bundle of all of your customizations, and then you can reapply those after you've run the upgrade. So they're treated the same way that any other customization is treated, whether you created it here or in the application architect itself.
All right. Our next question is, can you change the field type, pick list, lookup, etc.?
No, because that's tied to the actual field itself in the database. So it's going to inherit the field type that you used or selected when you created the actual field in the database. It's going to inherit that field type. So if it's a combo box or a checkbox or something like that, and that's what it's going to be when you drag it from the right over to the left. You'd have to change it in the database manager itself in the administrator tool. You have to take it as is in this inline editor thing we're monkeying with today.
All right. Our next question is, can you add fields to the list on the right from, as an example, associated tables?
Yes. And by the way, here's that tooltip we created. It's pretty big. So I don't know how big it could be, but you can see that it would be a whole paragraph if you wanted it to be. So the question was, the table structure on the right, it mirrors the table structure of the database. I'll make this a little bit bigger here so it's easier to see. So here, for example, these plus signs show you other tables that are child tables that are joined, for example, to a count. And so quite literally every table and every field in every table in the entire database is available to you on the right-hand side under this Add a Field view. So if it's available in the database, you're going to see it here.
All right. Our next question is, can we add tabs to the tickets module that would be a custom form?
You cannot. Not from here. You'd have to add the tab in the application architect. But here's what's cool. Once you add the tab in the application architect, you can add all the fields in this inline editor. So it would be a placeholder, more or less. And so if you don't want to build it all out completely in the application architect, you could come in here then and add all the fields if you prefer. But the answer to your question is you cannot add a net new tab or view here in the form designer. You can only modify forms and views that already exist. To add anything brand new, you'd have to do that in the application architect.
All right. The last question we have right now is, you mentioned you can hide a field, or mention you hide a field and can overwrite it, but can you remove it?
You cannot remove it. That's a great question. That is a limitation. I can hide it, but I cannot remove it here. You can remove it totally in the application architect, but you can't remove it in this inline editor. I can make it invisible, but the problem with that is now you have a blank space on the screen where it used to be. So you can put a different field over the top. In other words, you can bind that to something else. But once you've added a row like we did here for exchange rate and reason, you can't delete that here in the inline editor. I can hide both of these, you get that. But to get rid of it altogether, you'd have to open this view in the application architect, and it's in that tool that you can get rid of these fields totally and or get rid of this row. All right, anything else?
Yeah, it looked like we had another one pop up. Once you make a field invisible, how do you make it visible again?
You just recheck that box. So if it's invisible and you saved it, highlight the field and go back to advanced and turn visible back on again, and it'll show back up on the screen when you save your changes. Comes right back. That's all you have to do.
And we had another one, a couple of them, come in here. Let's see, can you change the font on the title of the field?
No, it inherits the font from the actual, I think it's called a .css file for the interface. So the entire website, the whole web client, inherits a style sheet. So you can't change like one font on one control, at least not from here. So the answer is no. It's going to inherit the font of the actual master file.
Okay. A question that I have, another one that came in, is what is the -1 value in some of the advanced settings?
I don't know what that is for sure. I'd have to ask one of our developers what that means. I noticed that too. I mean, I get the advanced length and required. That all makes sense to me. I'm not really sure what this -1 decimal digits is. I think it has something to do with it looks for whole numbers. and you can't have like 50.22. I think that's what it means, is that it's looking for whole numbers only and is going to ignore anything with a decimal point. But I'm not 100% positive on that.
Let's see. Our next one is, can you add restrictions or validations to control?
Not from here, other than you can mask it with some format types, but there's no business rules here. There may be a way to do it, but I don't know the answer to that for sure. I don't think you can, but again, we'll find out from one of our developers the answer to that question.
Thanks, Scott. And I had somebody chime in and say that the -1 value means there is no size limit and no max number of decimals. Does that...
Okay, so it's the opposite of what I thought. Okay, thank you for clarifying. I figured somebody would know. So I appreciate
somebody
that.
A little more developer-like.
Yeah, above my pay grade.
Let's see. Right now, Scott, that is the end of our questions. I don't have anything else popping up at the moment.
All right, terrific.